In just 45 seconds, one of Hollywood's most respected actors completely dismantled a late-night host on live television, turning what should have been a celebration of his latest film into an explosive showdown that has the entire internet buzzing. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife, the insults so sharp they left the studio audience gasping, and the final moment so dramatic that crew members stood frozen in shock as Samuel L.L. Jackson gathered his belongings and marched straight off the set, leaving Stephen Colbert sitting alone under the bright lights with his mouth hanging open. Last night's episode started innocently enough. Samuel L. Jackson walked onto the stage wearing his signature leather jacket and that cool, confident stride that made him a legend. The audience went wild, clapping and cheering as he took his seat across from Stephen Colbert. Jackson smiled, gave a little wave, and settled into the chair like he'd done this 1,000 times before, because he has. This was supposed to be a fun conversation about his new action movie, maybe some jokes about his iconic roles, the usual late-night television stuff. But within minutes, everything started to go wrong. Colbert opened with what seemed like a simple question about Jackson's career, but there was something in his tone that felt off. He leaned back in his chair with that smug little grin he gets sometimes, and asked Jackson about a comment the actor had made in a recent interview about the state of Hollywood. Jackson had said that studios were playing it too safe, that they weren't taking risks anymore, and that the creativity was being sucked out of the industry by executives who only cared about making money. It was an honest observation from someone who'd been in the business for decades, but Colbert didn't treat it that way. "So, Samuel," Colbert said, dragging out the name like he was talking to a child, "you've been pretty vocal about Hollywood needing to take more risks. That's interesting coming from someone who's been in, 9 different Marvel movies? Aren't those the definition of playing it safe?" The audience let out a nervous laugh. Jackson's smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. He tilted his head slightly, studying Colbert like he was trying to figure out if this was a joke or a genuine jab. "Well, Stephen," Jackson replied slowly, "there's a difference between being part of a successful franchise and making the same movie over and over again because you're afraid to try something new. Marvel took a huge risk when they started. Nobody knew if it would work." Colbert waved his hand dismissively. Right. But now it's just a machine, isn't it? You show up, say your lines, collect your paycheck, and boom, another billion-dollar movie. Where's the art in that?" You could feel the temperature in the room drop. Jackson sat up a little straighter in his chair. His jaw tightened. "The art," he said, his voice getting that dangerous edge that anyone who's seen his movies knows means trouble, "is in bringing characters to life that people actually care about. It's in showing up every single day and giving everything you've got, even when you're wearing a ridiculous costume and standing in front of a green screen. Not everyone can do that, Stephen. It takes talent." The emphasis on Colbert's name was deliberate, sharp, like the crack of a whip. The host's smile wavered for just a second, but he pushed forward, clearly thinking he could turn this into a playful back and forth. He couldn't have been more wrong. "Talent, sure," Colbert said, leaning forward now, his elbows on his desk. "But let's be honest. How much talent does it really take to play the same character in 20 different movies? I mean, Nick Fury basically has one expression. You've perfected the intense stare and the gravelly voice. Is that really stretching yourself as an actor?" The audience went dead silent. Even the band seemed to stop moving. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was a direct insult to one of the most accomplished actors in Hollywood, and everyone in that studio knew it. Jackson's eyes went cold. He didn't blink. He just stared at Colbert for what felt like an eternity. And when he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but absolutely lethal. "You know what, Stephen? I've been doing this job for over 40 years. I've worked with Spielberg, Tarantino, Spike Lee. I've played everything from drug addicts to Jedi Masters to superheroes. I've earned my place in this industry through hard work, dedication, and yes, talent. So before you sit there behind your desk and judge what I do, maybe you should think about what you bring to the table. Because hosting a talk show where you read jokes other people wrote for you? That's not exactly groundbreaking either." The air in the studio felt electric. A few people in the audience gasped. Others started whispering to each other. Colbert's face went red. His smile completely disappeared, replaced by a tight-lipped expression that showed he wasn't expecting Jackson to fire back this hard. But instead of backing down or changing the subject like a smart host would do, Colbert decided to double down on his attack. Wow. Okay, Colbert said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Didn't realize I struck such a nerve. I'm just saying what a lot of critics have been saying for years. You're a great actor, Samuel. Nobody's denying that. But maybe you've gotten a little comfortable. Maybe you've stopped challenging yourself. When was the last time you did something that really pushed you? Something that wasn't a guaranteed box office hit? Jackson let out a short, bitter laugh. You want to talk about getting comfortable? Let's talk about you, Stephen. You've been doing the same shtick for how many years now? The fake outrage, the political rants, the superiority complex. You act like you're some kind of voice of the people, but you're just another wealthy guy in a suit making millions while pretending to care about regular folks. At least I'm honest about what I do. I make movies. I entertain people. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. The gloves were completely off now. Colbert's face turned an even deeper shade of red. He opened his mouth to respond, but Jackson wasn't done. He was on a roll, and decades of frustration with smug interviewers seemed to be pouring out all at once. And you know what else? Jackson continued, his voice rising. I'm tired of people like you acting like making blockbuster movies is somehow beneath real art. Millions of people around the world watch the films I make. They bring joy to families. They inspire kids. They create memories. What does your show do? Make half the country hate you while the other half uses you to feel superior? That's not art, man. That's just divisive bullshit. The curse word hung in the air like a bomb. Network censors were probably having heart attacks. The audience didn't know whether to gasp or applaud. Some people started clapping nervously, unsure what was happening. Colbert's producers were likely screaming in his earpiece, telling him to go to commercial, to salvage this disaster before it got worse. But Colbert's ego wouldn't let him back down. His hands gripped the edge of his desk, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost all pretense of friendliness. That's rich coming from you, Colbert shot back. You want to talk about divisive? How about the time you called out reporters for not knowing the difference between your movies? Or when you went off on that interviewer for mixing you up with Lawrence Fishburne? You have a reputation for being difficult, Samuel. Everyone in this industry knows it. Maybe the problem isn't with the interviewers. Maybe the problem is with you. That was the line. That was the moment when this confrontation went from heated to explosive, from a tense exchange to something that would trend on social media for days. Jackson's entire body language changed. He sat completely still for a moment. His eyes locked onto Colbert with an intensity that made the host visibly uncomfortable. When Jackson finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled, which somehow made it even more terrifying than if he'd been yelling. You want to go there? You really want to go there with me right now? On your own damn show? Colbert tried to laugh it off, but his laugh sounded forced and weak. I'm just being honest, Samuel. This is what my show is about. Having real conversations, not just softball questions and fake laughter. Real conversations, Jackson repeated, his eyebrows shooting up. Man, you don't know the first thing about real conversations. You know what a real conversation is? It's two people showing each other respect. It's listening instead of just waiting for your turn to be clever. But you don't actually care what I have to say, do you? You just wanted me here so you could take shots at me. Make yourself look smart in front of your audience. Get some viral clips for social media. Well, congratulations, Stephen. You're about to get your viral moment. The audience was completely silent now. You could hear people shifting in their seats, the uncomfortable creak of chairs, someone coughing nervously. The band members were looking at each other with wide eyes, nobody knowing what to do. Colbert's producers must have been losing their minds backstage, but the cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of this train wreck. Colbert's face had gone from red to almost purple. His carefully crafted television persona was cracking, and underneath it was just a man who didn't like being challenged on his own show. You know what your problem is? Colbert said, his voice shaking slightly. You can dish it out, but you can't take it. You've spent your whole career playing tough guys, but the moment someone questions you, you fall apart. Maybe all those characters you play are just hiding the fact that you're insecure. That was it. That was the nuclear option. Calling Samuel L. Jackson insecure. Questioning his toughness. suggesting his entire career was based on hiding his true self. The look on Jackson's face was something that would haunt Colbert for a long time. It wasn't anger anymore. It was pure contempt. The kind of look you give someone who isn't even worth your time. Insecure? Jackson said quietly. Brother, I know exactly who I am. I've known it for 40 years. I'm a black man who made it in Hollywood, when Hollywood didn't want black men making it. I broke down doors. I created opportunities. I changed the game. And I did it without compromising who I am, without kissing ass, without pretending to be someone I'm not. Can you say the same thing, Stephen? Colbert opened his mouth, but Jackson held up a hand, stopping him cold. No, I'm talking now. You had your turn. See, the difference between you and me is that I'm authentic. When people see me, they get the real thing. But you're a character too. This whole woke liberal talk show host thing you do, that's an act. You play a role just like I do, except you pretend you're not. At least I'm honest about it. At least I don't act like I'm better than everyone else. The audience started murmuring now, some people agreeing, others shocked at how personal this had gotten. A few people started pulling out their phones, recording what they could even though it was against studio rules. This was history happening right in front of them, and they knew it. This was the kind of moment that would be replayed and analyzed for years. Colbert tried to regain control of the situation. Okay, I think we need to take a breath here, and maybe go to commercial. Nah, we're not going to commercial, Jackson interrupted, his voice hard as steel. We're going to finish this conversation right now. You started this, Stephen. You brought me on your show, you insulted my work, you called me difficult, you said I was insecure. You don't get to back out now just because it's not going the way you planned. Colbert looked genuinely rattled now. His hands were trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie. Samuel, I think you're overreacting. This was supposed to be a fun conversation. I didn't mean to offend you. You didn't mean to offend me? Jackson's laugh was harsh and bitter. Man, everything you said was designed to offend me. You knew exactly what you were doing. You wanted to take down Samuel L. Jackson on live television, boost your ratings, prove how edgy and unafraid you are. Well, you know what? You're not edgy. You're not brave. You're just rude. And there's a big difference. The tension in the room was suffocating. Every eye was glued to the two men, watching this verbal warfare unfold in real time. Colbert's makeup was starting to run slightly from the stress and the hot studio lights. His carefully styled hair was getting messy as he kept running his hands through it nervously. Everything about him screamed that he'd lost control of his own show, and he didn't know how to get it back. Look, Colbert said, trying a different approach, his voice softer now, almost pleading. Maybe we both said some things we shouldn't have. Why don't we start over? We can edit some of this out and... Edit it out? Jackson cut him off again. No. You don't get to edit this out. This is what you wanted, remember? Real conversation. Raw. Honest. Well, here it is, Stephen. Here's the truth. You're a bully. You hide behind comedy and political correctness and self-righteousness. But at the end of the day, you're just a bully who uses his platform to make people feel small. And I'm done being part of it. Jackson started to stand up. And that's when Colbert made his biggest mistake of the night. Maybe it was panic. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the desperate need to have the last word. But whatever it was, it pushed him to say something that would seal his fate. Oh, come on, Samuel. Don't be so dramatic. You're not going to walk off my show. Your publicist would kill you. Just sit down and let's finish this like adults. The condescension in Colbert's voice, the dismissive tone, the way he ordered Jackson to sit down like he was scolding a child, it was the final straw. Jackson had been leaning forward, about to sit back down, but those words stopped him cold. He straightened up to his full height, looking down at Colbert with an expression that could freeze fire. When he spoke, every word was crystal clear and sharp as a razor. Like adults? Jackson said, his voice dangerously quiet. Adults show respect. Adults know when they've crossed a line. Adults apologize when they're wrong. But you're not going to do any of that, are you, Stephen? Because in your mind, you're never wrong. You're always the smartest guy in the room. Well, let me tell you something. You're not half as clever as you think you are. And this right here? This is exactly why people are tired of shows like yours. Jackson reached down and unclipped his microphone, the small piece of equipment making a sharp popping sound as he yanked it free from his jacket. The gesture was so deliberate, so final, that several audience members gasped out loud. This wasn't a threat anymore. This was actually happening. Samuel L. Jackson was about to walk off Stephen Colbert's show on live television, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. "Wait, Samuel, come on," Colbert started to say, half rising from his chair, his voice cracking with genuine panic now. But Jackson wasn't waiting for anything. He dropped the microphone onto the chair where he'd been sitting, the thud echoing through the stunned silence of the studio. "I've been in this business long enough to know when I'm being disrespected," Jackson said, his voice carrying across the entire studio even without the microphone. "And I'm definitely not going to sit here and let some talk show host talk down to me like I'm nobody. I've earned my respect, Stephen. I've earned it through years of hard work, through taking roles that scared me, through fighting for representation when nobody else would. What have you earned? The ability to make fun of people from behind a desk?" The audience was completely split now. Some people were clapping, supporting Jackson's stand against what they saw as Colbert's arrogance. Others sat in shocked silence, unable to believe this was really happening. A few people were recording on their phones, capturing every moment of this historic meltdown. The producers were probably screaming backstage, but nobody cut to commercial. The cameras kept rolling, documenting everything. Colbert's face had gone pale now, the reality of the situation finally hitting him. His show, his reputation, his carefully crafted image as the friendly, progressive host, all of it was crumbling in real time. "Samuel, please," he said, and for the first time that night, he actually sounded sincere. "I'm sorry if I went too far. Can we just talk about this?" Jackson paused, standing there in front of millions of viewers, and for a moment, it looked like he might actually give Colbert a chance to make things right. But then he shook his head slowly, a sad smile crossing his face. "You know what the problem is, Stephen. You're only sorry because this didn't go the way you wanted. You're sorry because you look bad now, not because you actually regret what you said. That's not a real apology. That's damage control." The truth of those words hit like a freight train. Colbert opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked lost, desperate, like a man watching his career flash before his eyes. His hands gripped the edge of his desk so hard his knuckles turned white. The confident, witty talk show host who always had a perfect comeback was completely silent. "I came here tonight to promote a movie," Jackson continued, his voice steady and strong. "I came here to have a good time, to connect with an audience, to do what I've been doing for 40 years. But instead, you decided to make this about your ego. You wanted to prove something, and you know what? You did. You proved that you're exactly the kind of person I thought you were." Jackson started walking toward the exit, his leather jacket swishing with each step. The audience didn't know what to do. Some people started clapping louder. Others were calling out, asking him to stay. But Jackson kept walking, his head held high, every inch of him radiating dignity and strength. This wasn't a man running away. This was a man choosing not to waste another second of his time. Colbert finally found his voice again. "Samuel, wait," he called out, standing up fully now, stepping out from behind his desk. "We can fix this. Just give me 5 minutes." Jackson stopped at the edge of the stage and turned around one last time. The look he gave Colbert was one of pure disappointment, the kind of look that hurts worse than anger. "Fix this?" he said. "Stephen, you can't fix this. You can't fix it because you don't even understand what you did wrong. You think this is about a bad interview, but it's bigger than that. It's about how you treat people. It's about respect. And that's something you clearly don't have for me or for anyone else who doesn't fit into your little worldview." Those final words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Jackson didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked straight through the backstage entrance, disappearing from view. The heavy door swung shut behind him with a loud bang that seemed to echo forever in the silent studio. He was gone. Samuel L. Jackson had actually walked off Stephen Colbert's show, and there was no taking it back. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Colbert stood there frozen in the middle of his stage, looking at the spot where Jackson had disappeared. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no sound came out. The audience was a mess of confused murmuring, shocked gasps, and scattered applause. Some people were standing, others were sitting with their hands over their mouths. The band members looked at each other with wide eyes, clearly wondering if they should start playing something, anything to fill the horrible silence. Finally, one of the producers must have gotten through to Colbert because he slowly walked back to his desk, his legs moving like they weren't quite connected to his body. He sat down heavily in his chair and stared directly at the camera, his face a mask of shock and embarrassment. "Well," he said, his voice hollow and defeated, "that was unexpected. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back we'll try to figure out what just happened here." The camera held on his face for a moment longer, capturing the exact instant when a talk show host realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. Then finally, mercifully, they cut to commercial. But the damage was done. Within minutes, clips of the confrontation were spreading across every social media platform. People were taking sides, arguing about who was right and who was wrong. News outlets were already preparing stories about the dramatic showdown. Entertainment reporters were calling their sources, trying to get statements from both camps. The show continued after the commercial break, but everyone could tell Colbert's heart wasn't in it. He stumbled through his remaining segments, making weak jokes that fell flat, his usual energy completely gone. The audience was still buzzing about what they'd witnessed, barely paying attention to anything else. When the show finally ended, Colbert didn't do his usual cheerful sign-off. He just thanked everyone for watching and disappeared as quickly as Jackson had. Backstage, according to people who were there, Jackson had already left the building. He'd walked straight to his car and driven off without speaking to anyone, leaving his publicist to deal with the aftermath. Colbert's team was in full crisis mode, debating whether to edit the footage before it aired in other time zones, trying to craft a statement that wouldn't make things worse. But it was too late. The internet had already decided what happened, and no amount of damage control could change the narrative. This wasn't just a bad interview. This was a cultural moment, a clash between two different philosophies about respect, authenticity, and what it means to use a platform responsibly. Samuel L. Jackson had drawn a line in the sand and refused to cross it, even when it would have been easier to just laugh it off and play along. He'd shown that sometimes walking away is the most powerful statement you can make. And Stephen Colbert had learned a hard lesson about the difference between being clever and being kind, between entertaining an audience and respecting a guest. The confrontation was over, but the conversation it started was just beginning.